In this episode of the Brawn Body Health and Fitness Podcast, we are talking all about coaching with one of the most legendary coaches to ever help athletes, Dr. Frank Dick. Frank really needs no introduction. He's coached Olympians, he's coached high performers. He is one of the most successful coaches to ever walk on the planet. We're specifically diving into how he coached elite athletes, the winning formula that he used for working with athletes, the key questions that he asks, and how we can apply these lessons to everyone, everyday people, because the right coach has a bigger impact on you. It's not just sports performance. The right coach has an impact on your entire life, and the lessons that you learn from them carry over into so many other areas of your overall life. And with that, I'd like to say a big thank you to all of the coaches that have impacted me across my lifespan thus far, because I wouldn't be where I am without the lessons that I've learned throughout my life and experiences playing sports and doing different things growing up. Before we get to this amazing episode, here's a quick word from one of our sponsors. Frank, welcome to the podcast. Really excited to have you on today.
Okay, really pleased to be here.
So for people who aren't familiar with you and the amazing legacy that you have had and the impact you've had on the world of coaching worldwide, could you kind of discuss a little bit about who you are and where your fascination for athletics came from?
Okay, well, very, very quickly, as a kid at school, I was kind of a skinny little guy. It was a rugby playing school, and I was the guy who was getting knocked over most of the time. But I began to get a bit of a passion for running, and so ended up going to a Scottish schoolboys course. I'd idolized a character called Tony Chapman, who was the national coach, and kind of maybe at that moment, I thought to myself, one day, maybe. Anyway, life went on. I did a lot of track and field at school. Moved on as an athlete. I eventually got to Loughborough University or Loughborough College, which was really quite famous, even at that time, for producing athletes and for following track and field and for preparing teachers, because that's what I was trying to do, be a physical education teacher at that point. Growing out of that was I was already trying to write schedules for other people, even when I was an athlete. Well, we left Loughborough, and at that point, Loughborough wasn't giving degrees. And so I figured with a friend of mine, Bill Pink, to see if I could get a Fulbright scholarship and go to the United States and study in the University of Oregon, because there was a coach I was really interested in there called Bill Bauman. And so that happened. I went all the way across there, worked under Bill for a year. And I was really into it by that time. I was desperate to get into coaching. However, there was not a lot of professional opportunities at that point. And at one point, I'd been offered a fellowship to study educational philosophy in UBC in Vancouver. And I went up to say goodbye to my mom and dad. But who should I bump into in Edinburgh, my hometown? But Tony Chapman, that same guy that I was a kid. And he said, do you realize that John Anderson, who was then the national coach, has resigned? He said, why don't you apply for the job? And I said, no, I've made my mind up now. I'm going to go to Canada. I like the way, I like life across there. And he said, no, just apply for it for a laugh and see what happens. Well, it was more than a laugh. They offered me the job, and that started it. It was Scottish national coach, then director of coaching for the United Kingdom. And that took me into a world where, on the one hand, I'd written the coach education program for Scotland that was now going to be the coach education program for the United Kingdom. I was a head coach, and I was also an active practical coach. And I suppose the guy that you'd know mostly from track and field that I worked with is Daley Thompson, as a double Olympic gold medalist and world record holder.
That's awesome.
In decathlon. So that was it. I'd got to that point. But then I was being approached by people outside track and field. And a guy called Jon Tyriak asked me if I would work with Boris Becker, the tennis player. So I was still actually in track and field at that point. And I was just simply designing these conditioning programs and trying to create a sense of how you prepare in year plans, a sense of strategy to only peak at certain times. That grew into Katarina Witt, the ice skater, asking me to do the same thing, Gerhard Berger in Formula One, and then different sports. By that time, it was outside track and field, and the world of business was chasing me, because I'd managed to sell the concept that coaching wasn't just something that applied in sport, it applied in any aspect of life. Because at some point in your life, you're going to be a coach, whether it's to your children, whether it's to a partner, whether it's at work or whatever. At some point in life, you're going to be that. And so that broadened the whole thing. And that took me right through to the present time, where I'm working with World Athletics as the chair of the Global Athletics Coaching Academy, the president of the European Athletics Coaches Association. And just a couple of weeks ago, for World Athletics, we ran the World Athletics Coaches Club. My concept there being that we could have somewhere on site. The next one, by the way, is going to be in Eugene for the World Championships, but you could also have it virtually. And my dream there was that we can help coaches learn and be educated in real time with real experiences, rather than wait to be told the story afterwards. So people from around the world can participate in the event when it's happening, and we can bring in panelists from around the world to help shape coaches' education.
I love that concept. Love that concept, and love your journey and everything that you discussed on the realm of coaching. It's not just for athletes. That's where it seems to have started for you, but everyone needs a coach in one way or another. A coach is a mentor, and a good coach can have an impact on every aspect of your life, right? A good coach is remembered by people. I still remember my good coaches and my bad coaches from high school and my days growing up, right? They had an impact on my life that reached beyond the sport. And that's something that is extremely valuable. And if we bring people together, like you're discussing, and we learn from one another's experiences, we as coaches and as instructors and mentors get the coaching and mentorship that we need to elevate our game to the next level. It's a way to have an impact that's intangible, right? We get impacted by someone, then we turn around and impact someone else. It's an amazing concept.
And I think one of the things that you learn as you become less young in life, you never stop learning. You know that you, at one point in your life, you think you know just about everything, and then suddenly you realize you don't know all that much. And as far as coach is concerned, that's really important, that you see life, you see your learning journey as a never-ending story. And so a large part, you've gathered it from the story I've given you of my background, a large part of my life now is coaching the coaches. But that brings us into what a coach is supposed to do in life. And my message to all coaches is you've actually got two jobs when you're working with your athletes or with developing other people. As a sports coach, your first job is to prepare athletes for performing in their arena. And your second job is to prepare them through that process to perform better in life. So you're doing the two things. And I think most coaches get that, you know. I mean, if you go to some of the huge heroes in coaching that you've had in the United States, John Wooden, for example, who was you'll remember was the head coach of the UCLA Bruins, one of the greatest coaches in history in any sport. And he defined coaching as taking athletes from who they are to who they're capable of becoming, because that's not just in what's going to happen on the basketball court or on the track. It's what's going to happen in your life. And right. You've just said it yourself, the impact that coaches have had on your life. There are messages there that last forever. And one of the reasons for that is that one of the big skills that every coach has to master is the ability to tell stories, right? To create analogy, to create metaphor, so that you have a picture in your mind of a feeling. You know, so for example, the language that we have to use in coaching very often is what I call kinesthesis. I'll give you an example of that.
Mhm.
Years ago, I was working with a young lad called Cameron Sharp. He's a 200 meters athlete. And he was good, but I knew he could be better. And what was happening was he was running a pretty good bend, but coming off the bend, nothing seemed to happen. And it was just kind of trying to last the straight. And I kept on saying to him, you got to drive off the bend. You got to drive off the bend. And nothing. Didn't mean a jot to him. But I happened to be training one day in Edinburgh with him, and it was the Edinburgh Highland Games were coming up at Meadowbank, and Don Quarry, who'd been the Olympic gold medalist in 200 meters, he happened to be running at the competition. And as he was jogging past me, he said, "Hey, Frankie, it's not driving, it's lift. Ask him to lift." And I then changed that trick, changed my language, nailed it first time. And just as an aside on that, why I was wrong is that the only time you really drive in sprinting is when you're accelerating from the blocks. And in these strides, you've got a relatively longer contact time with the ground. When you're at full speed, you've got hardly any contact time with the ground. You're touching it. You're running over eggs as you move forward. Mm-hmm. And every time I was asking him to drive, I was asking him to do absolutely the wrong thing, because to him driving was like coming off the blocks.
Right.
And the bottom line to this part of the conversation is get your language right.
No, I cannot agree with you more. That's incredibly important, and we often don't. When we're coaching someone or training someone, we often don't look in the mirror and think, what am I saying or what am I doing wrong? We often continue on whatever we're saying and just expect the athlete will eventually get it, right? And I like a while ago, we worked with Eric Diagati, and he used his 2-week rule. If I'm not making a change in 2 weeks with this athlete, I have to change my own strategy, because maybe it's not them that's the problem. Maybe it's what I'm doing. And I also like what Dr. Kelly Starrett said at the end of February in our podcast with him. He was talking about the concept of pain, right? And, athletes will come and they'll be like, yeah, my shoulder feels sore, achy, my hip feels this, my knee feels that. And so many coaches back off of training through pain, right? And it's the fact that we don't have the understanding of what that pain is. We have to seek further. We have to ask further questions. We have to understand the language and vernacular that's being used, because I guarantee you, if you put someone like you or I in the head of some of these different athletes that you mentioned, like Boris Becker, the tennis player there, or other one that comes to mind is like Bodie Miller, the skier, right? If we put ourselves in his mind at the end of a match, at the end of a ski race, pick any high caliber athlete, if you put yourself in their mind, I would imagine that they're in quite a bit of pain when they're competing. Their muscles are burning up, their lungs are screaming for air, but they mentally have the capacity to push through it. So if we just stop training through pain, then we never get to that point, right? So it's seeking that further understanding of what words actually mean and how little changes in your approach can have such a big impact on that athlete's training.
Yeah, for sure. And so in order to get that language right, maybe one of the golden rules that every coach should remember is know your people. Make time to know your people. And part of that is was highlighted to me by a lady called Corinne Reed, who is one of the top best in the world psychologists for in sport. She coached she was the psychologist with Rick Charlesworth when he coached the back-to-back women's Olympic gold medalists in field hockey. And the expression that she used was, you have to know your stress signature. And I'd never heard that expression before. But for example, if I'm working with you and we're in a team together, it's kind of important for me to know what are the things that irritate you and can maybe make you lose it out there. What are the things that motivate you and keep you going? Is there a word that you like to hear at the right moment to keep you going through things? And I really love that concept. But once you understand how important it is to know your people and know each one of their stress signature, it's also kind of important to know your own. It's really important to know your own. And again, most people don't make time to do that as a coach. We really have to know ourselves as much as we know our athletes. And you know, there's an adage that's flying around at the moment is there's a gold standard and a platinum standard in how you treat people. First of all, the gold standard is treat people the way you'd like to be treated yourself. The platinum standard is treat people the way they want to be treated. And there's a subtle difference between the two things. But that all comes to knowing our people.
And that speaks to the importance of individualized coaching, right? Each athlete needs different coaching. Each athlete has different goals, right? Take a high school football team. Someone on that high school football team might want to play in college. Someone might just be there because they want to be fit, active, and in shape. And someone might be there because they like football. All three of them are correct. They're all there. None of them is in the wrong. But the way you coach each of those athletes is different. And if you don't take the time to individualize your coaching approach, like you said, to the specific athlete, diving in deeper to what their goals are, what language do they like to hear, what stresses them, what motivates them. If you can leverage those things effectively and efficiently, then you become a much more powerful coach and you get so much more out of your athlete, right? It's not necessarily just push them harder, train them harder, more conditioning, more strength training, more drills. Sometimes it's that psychology component, the mental component. And I know that you also talk about that in detail in your sports training principles book there. I have the 6th edition, and I love how you really dive into that concept of things that impact performance that aren't necessarily the physical, aren't the things that we see or think of right away.
But I think to start off with, I think that you have to come to some clear understanding of and with the athlete you're going to be working with. And that starts with, in my mind, 3 questions. What do you want? I mean, what is it you really want out there? What's your goal? And it could be any of the 3 options that you've just given, right? Second question is, how much does it cost? We're not talking about economics here. We're talking about truly understanding what has to be done to get to that goal that you're wanting. And the final one is the big one, I suppose. Are you prepared to pay the price?
Yeah.
And it's once you start off on that journey and you've got all these questions together, you're right. There are certain fundamentals you must work on from the beginning. It's what I call controllables. And the controllables are the things naturally that you can control, your basic techniques, the fundamental principles, all those things. Some of these things, maybe 10 years ago, you wouldn't have been able to control. So you have to keep on top of that to work out just how many of these things you can control to do with their performance and their growth. Once you've got that into place, there are 2 areas. There's the elimination of errors, and there's to find what some people will call marginal gains, what I'll call the winning edge. Now, as far as the errors are concerned, there's a guy called Ross Brawn who was the head engineer with Ferrari, and what he was in Formula One, and he started to focus on the pit stops, and realizing that maybe we could get these better because maybe there are little mistakes that are being made out there. When he started, it was 8 seconds for a pit stop, and understand what was happening there. The car was coming in, it was being jacked up, the nuts off, wheels back on, nuts on, refueling the car, cleaning the visor, realigning the computer in 8 seconds, right? He got it down to 6 seconds. Right? More recently, Red Bull, and they don't refuel anymore. Red Bull got it down to 3.2 seconds by eliminating, right? The other side, as I say, is finding these marginal bits. And tell a story about a young Scottish lad who wanted to swim for Great Britain in the Olympic Games in London. And he'd heard that in cycling, these guys are constantly looking for these tiny little bits that are going to make a difference. And so he got in touch with one of the coaches in cycling. He said, well, what kind of things do you do? He said, well, we do lots of things. Like what? Give me an example. I said, well, did you know we put vinegar on the spokes of the wheels? Really? He says, yeah. Said, what difference did that make? Said, almost nothing. Oh. So he left, but it was a stone in his shoe. And he phoned him back up again 2 weeks later. And he said, listen, I don't get it. Why would you do something that does nothing? He said, I didn't say that. I said, almost nothing. Now, the bit is, if you look at those things that you can examine to make a difference in your athletes, they can be physiological, they can be psychological, they can be biomechanical, they can be medical or medical related things, they can be logistics. Once you start examining these areas and drilling down, believe me, very quickly you come to over 50 little areas. Now, the bit is you can get almost nothing out of each one of them. It's when you add them together, you get a significant something, and that makes a difference. Once you put that together, and to summarize so far, you've controlled the controllables. You've got basic techniques, bits and pieces in place that are going to be robust and the right kind of techniques, because if you've got the wrong technique and you try to get faster or stronger, you're simply going to get faster and stronger at doing something wrong, right? So you get these basics right in the controllable side. Then you look at the error elimination and the advantages, and then that leads to two things: to have an agility of mind to dealing with change in the arena, because the life is changing by the moment out there. Secondly, you've got to have an agility of mind to turn uncertainty to your advantage. The truth in life is there's no certainties in sport. That's what makes it fantastic. And you can train, you can get the most perfect program, but there's still not going to be a certainty out there because the opposition are wanting the same things you are. Once you've got these two things in place, then you begin to make the right decisions under pressure out there in the arena. And once you do that, you'll win, and you'll win, and you'll win, and you'll keep on winning.
And you become unstoppable. And one thing that really stands out to me is you never mentioned focusing on the uncontrollable things in there, right? You never mentioned,
absolutely.
Yep. You never mentioned like, focus on the weather because, the weather, it could be good, it could be bad, it could be, absolutely piss poor. And, focus on that, or focus on the referees, focus on the other team, focus on the things you can't control. No, that's not how championships are won. And that's not a winning mentality, right? As you said, it's not a easy process. I'll quote from Seneca here. In the meantime, you have to cling tooth and nail to the following rule: not to give in to adversity, not to trust in prosperity, and always take full note of fortune's habit of behaving just as she pleases, right? You might be the underdog in a match and you might come out on top because you have more will to win. You want it more than the other team, right? But there's always going to be an obstacle in your path in sports. Maybe it's the other team. Maybe it is the officials in a certain case. Maybe it's yourself. Maybe it's someone on your own team. But that obstacle can become your path forward if you approach it correctly, right? That obstacle can make you or break you.
You're absolutely right. There's a book, and unfortunately, the author's gone straight out of my head. It's called "The Obstacle Is the Way."
Ryan Holiday.
That's the Stoicism. There's another book I would recommend, and that's "The Courage to Be Disliked." If you've not read it, it's by two Japanese authors. It's brilliant. It's written like a one of the old dialogues, the Hippocrates dialogues in a former philosophy time, where the apprentice, if you like, is asking the master kind of thing question. It's a beautiful book. It starts off with the apprentice saying, look, basically the reason I've come to speak to you is I think you're talking a lot of crap. It doesn't quite say that. And the master said, well, that's good. I'm glad you brought that up. Why do you think that? And then we start going deeper and deeper and deeper to get to the controllables. And the bit that you have a choice. It's actually very close to Adlerian psychology as opposed to Freudian and Jung psychology. Freudian convinced us that we were victims of our childhood, parents and bits and pieces. Adler is absolutely the other way around. It's you that's in control. You run your life. Nobody else runs it for you. It's your decisions. And it really is. I think that the first book they wrote was The Courage to be Disliked. The next one was The Courage to be Happy. Both really good books. But they're actually following up what you've just said.
Right. And the other one that comes to mind for me is, I forget the book. I think it might have been called The Way of the Samurai or something similar. It was by, I'll butcher this pronunciation, but Lord Naoshagi, a Japanese individual from years ago. And one of the things that really stuck with me from that book was he talks about the way of the samurai, which was one of the most fierce warriors in history. And he makes it clear that the way of the samurai was in desperateness. Common sense does not accomplish great things. And he hits home on the point that you have to become almost, I'll say, insane and desperate about whatever you're trying to accomplish if you are destined for great things. And I think that kind of plays into coaching and athletics, right? We look at these athletic greats, individuals like Tom Brady in the US, or Kobe Bryant in the US, Michael Jordan, or, across the pond there in Europe, we look at guys like Ronaldo or Messi in soccer. And these individuals don't look at their sport as a part-time job, right? To them, sport is everything. They are fully invested and committed in their sport, right? In Tom Brady's example, he retired, and 40 days later, 6 weeks later, he was back in the sport because he couldn't really handle a life without sport, right? You become so obsessed with the process. You become so invested in the self-improvement and self-betterment game, and you fall in love with the sport. And as a result, you become one of the greatest. And if you never fall in love with that process, if you never start that process in the first place, as you mentioned earlier, maybe someone doesn't take the time to focus on what they can control. Maybe someone doesn't go through and start to correct the errors in their game and see immediate benefit, immediate gains in performance, immediate result. And if they don't do those things, are they going to fall in love with the process? Are they going to become, the next elite level athlete in whatever they're competing in? And if once you fully invest in that process, and again, I'll go back to the same words I used before, you become a little bit desperate for success. You desire it, you solidify for it, and you wake up every morning, right? And you want that thing bad. You want it badder than the other guy. You want it badder than the other team. That's what cultivates success. And part of all the other things we've discussed, it's having that winning mindset and mentality, that kind of chip on your shoulder and attitude that you want more, that you want it. And it's not something that's easily explained to, I'll say, the average individual or someone who's not in athletics, because they might not be able to relate to wanting something so bad that they wake up every day and they work hours and hours and hours for it. Maybe they can, maybe it's more of a lifestyle goal. But
it's a big hunger, and it comes back to my three questions. What do you want? How much does it cost? Are you prepared to pay the price? And part of the cost is to be willing to step out. A lot of people talk about the risk of losing, which I think is rubbish, because you don't have to practice it. It can be a pretty big gift in life to be a loser. I argue that it's our job to take the risk of winning, to step beyond the line, to go where no other person's gone, which is why, I've always loved the the lines from Robert Frost and his poem, I guess everybody knows it, The Road Not Taken, where at the end of his last part was, I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. It's to have the courage to take that road that no one else will go on. A lot of people get in mind that winning at the end of the day is only trying to be better than you were yesterday, but it's more than that. I mean, that's fundamental. But the people who aspire to greatness, they're looking to do things differently and to do different things as part of being better. Because there comes a point of diminishing return in all of our lives if you just keep on doing the same thing, no matter how much better you're trying to do it. The curve flattens off, and at some point we've got to depart. We've got to come to the. I've just been writing a eulogy for a dear friend who's actually responsible for me taking up coaching in the first place, to be quite honest, at Loughborough, because he got me into Loughborough. Robbie Brightwell, an extraordinary guy, and the point I'm making in the eulogy is that life is just a series of crossroads. And your effectiveness and your achievement in life is all about the decisions that you make in each of these crossroads. And the winners in life are never look for the easy way. They never look for the shortcuts. If you, as John Wooden said, if you keep on trying to apply the tricks of the trade, you'll never learn the trade. You've got to take the hard stuff and keep going, and because sooner or later, nobody's going to follow you on that stuff. They'll never take that hard stuff. They'll never take the unfamiliar road, to take the risk of winning, to step beyond the edge, because that's what great achievers do.
You're right. You're absolutely right. As Thomas Edison said it, opportunity is often missed by people because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work, right? Hard choices makes for an easy life. Easy choices make for a hard life, right? There are always going to be, I love your analogy of the crossroads. There's always going to be two paths or multiple paths in front of you for any decision in sport, in life, in athletics, whatever you want to, whatever topic you want to throw in. You're always going to have decisions to make. And your choice of trying to cut corners or trying to take the challenging road will make or break you, just like you said. That challenging road, it might be harder, it might be more difficult, but you don't sharpen the blade on, the weak or light or easy stone, right? If you want to really sharpen your skill and sharpen your craft, you have to challenge yourself. If it doesn't challenge you, it's probably not going to change you. And I think we live in a time where too many people are choosing the easier path for some reason. And they forget that elite performers are not overnight successes. They do not ride talent, and they don't sacrifice who they could be for who they are, right?
You're right. When you're out there, you will get situations that are kind of like crises round about, and everything's coming at you. And really, there's a very simple three options that could be there. You can quit, you can wait and see, or you can fight. And the winners never quit. The winners never wait and see, because they know that achievement is not something you wait to happen. It's something you make happen.
Right.
So the only choice when it comes to the winners out there, the people who will achieve great things in life, not necessarily in an arena, but for the families, for the business that they work in. It doesn't matter where you are. It's your arena. You've got to stand up and be counted. It's the hard. You're coming back to a previous point. It is the hard stuff. But one thing's for sure. you have to learn how to fight
You do.
smartly.
You do. You have to fight. And even when you fail, like you mentioned before, you have to get up and continue to try and fail and continue to try and fail, and ensuring you never fail to try. Because
That's a really good area to go into. You've got a guy called Dennis Watley, I think his name is, who wrote a brilliant little summary of what failure is. And his opening line is, failure should be your teacher, not your undertaker. And failure is something you get if you do something, if you do nothing, if you are nothing, and you say nothing.
And then you will be nothing.
That's it. And there was something, but just lingering on this idea of failure. I work quite closely with a guy who, in my opinion, was one of the greatest football or soccer coaches ever, Alex Ferguson. He was a fellow Scot. And when Alex was with Aberdeen, I was a Scottish national coach. And when I became the director for the UK, he went to Manchester United. And so we kept together all the time. And we were trying to summarize, the winners and the losers out there. And he said, Frank, the one thing you have to be really good at is how you manage failure and how you manage success. And of course, the first one's easy, isn't it? Yeah, of course. You fail, you've got to learn, get back. Failure is not falling off your bike. It's not getting back in your bike again and pedaling even harder. We get that. But why do you have to manage success? Because I'd growing up, and my mum saying to me things like, success breeds success. You've heard these kind of comments. But Alex would say, success can derail progress because you can begin to believe that you don't have to do anything more. You become complacent. And I'll tell you a story about that. What Alex did in 1993, Manchester United had won the Premiership in England. And no team had ever won back-to-back premierships, right? It was a very tough league. And so he pulled in Gary Pallister, the team captain. He said, listen, son, the coaches and I have been having a talk, and you've got a couple of people in there who think that that's good enough. They're satisfied. He says, what do you mean? Who are they? He said, it's not for us to say, son. It's for you. You're the team captain. I want you to work this out. And you can imagine, as the season went on, every week he's coming back in. Look, boss, we just can't find them. Who are the guys that are satisfied and are becoming complacent? Says, son, this is for you to work out. It's not for me to tell you. You're the team captain. Went right through to the end of the season. And Gary came in and says, and they won. They've now got back-to-back championships. And he says, okay, boss, you'll have to tell us now. Who were they? He says, there was nobody, son. But you must never allow complacency to grow. And that, I think, is really important. Even when you're in the contest, even when you're out there in the field and you've now taken the lead, when you're in the lead, your objective is to go further in the lead, not to stay in the lead. It's right. To go further in the lead. When if you're going to take over the pace of a game and of the fight, then you do so to put pain on yourself. It comes back to your own expressions earlier. You do so to accept pain in the belief that other people cannot accept the pain that you can. If you take the lead to get comfortable, be very, very careful, because the other guys will know that you cannot take the pace and they'll go for you.
Exactly. I like to say that the wolf on top of the hill has to be more hungry than the wolf that's climbing the hill. And
good line.
I love the connection that you just drew with Sir Alex Ferguson there, because he is the most successful football manager in British football history. I think, What did he win? 12 or 13 titles with Manchester United. And he coached household names, right? Ryan Giggs, David Beckham, Nicky Butt, Gary and Phil, Neville, Paul Scholes, right? Like, he was the best of the best. So to take lessons from him, you can't get much better than that, right? And if he said, this is the recipe for success, I don't know how much more clear you can make it, right? And that's the kind of thing that I think so many people forget is it's good to be a pioneer. It's good to try and go out and develop your own way and own unique approach to things. But at the end of the day, there's already systems in place that have succeeded for people. You're going to take those systems and naturally make them your own. We're all different people. We're all different coaches. We've all got different experiences. We'll take approaches and put our own spin on them. We don't have to go out of our way to reinvent the wheel with this and come up with a whole new coaching strategy and coaching philosophy. That's why you have the books that you've written yourself, right? You've learned so much across your life in the way of coaching elite athletes and individuals in general, and you want to share that with people. And you don't want people to have to go through, you don't want athletes to have to go through poor coaching, and you don't want coaches to feel like they're lost in trying to help people achieve their goals and desired life outcomes, right? People have to start somewhere. And if you start with a system that's been in place and put your own spin on it, then you're one step ahead of the guy who's still sitting there contemplating, how am I going to do this? How am I going to put these pieces together and make this team a team? How am I going to bring this athlete to the goals that they want if I'm just sitting here twiddling my thumbs and contemplating it?
You're right. This takes us back to my point about being a lifelong learner. And learning is an interesting thing, you know. There's some things in life you can be taught. There are other things in life you can only learn through life experience. Mm-hmm. You can be taught the science of coaching. You can get it in books, you can get it in webinars, you can get it in lectures, you can get it in courses. You can be taught that stuff. But you can only learn the art, and you learn it through experience. And Vernon Law, I think, summed up the issue with experience is that she's the cruelest of all teachers because she gives you the test first and the lesson second. But in our lives, we must be willing to do that. If you're going to learn the art, find a good mentor, find somebody that you can go back to and have a conversation with. But when you go out in the arena, go through the experience. Obviously, if I'm coaching you, I'll give you the best preparation I can give you. But as we said earlier, there's uncertainty out there. You're going to be faced with situations where you're going to have to make a decision in something that you've never seen in your life before. If you like, it's a mini crossroads right there in front of you. But you make the decision, and the coach must not make the decision for you. I'll give you an example of that. Jessica Ennis, year before the Olympic Games in London, she's in Daegu for the World Championships. And it was tough competition. She had a problem with the javelin, and she finished with a silver medal. When her coach came home, Tony Minicello, really, really good coach. I love Tony. What he would do is give me a call, and we'd meet for coffee, and it'd go through what happened. And he said, "What do you think, Frankie?" I said, "Well, I'm not going to argue with 4 lifetime bests in the heptathlon over 2 days. I mean, that is seriously impressive. 4 lifetime bests." He said, "Are you going to say a but?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going to say a little but." He said, "When she was having problems with the javelin, what did she do?" "Well, she came to the side of the track to see me and Mick Hill, the javelin coach." So what did you do? So, well, I gave her advice, of course. I said, "That's what you did wrong." He said, "What do you mean? I mean, are you suggesting we gave her the wrong advice?" I said, "No, I'm suggesting you gave her advice." How is she going to learn to make decisions if you step in and make the decision for her? She learns nothing then. That's teaching. At some point, you have to have the courage to step back and allow somebody to learn. It's our job ultimately to create the environment for learning. I'm sure you'll have come across this at some point, but there's what they call a hierarchy of learning. You know, it starts off with learning to repeat. Right? I did it. I guess you must have done it. I used to read track technique as a young coach coming through, and I'd see there's a little article in there called "How They Train," and I used to look at this and copy it down and translate it into the coaching that I was doing. So you start off learning to repeat. But very, very quickly, you have to go to the next stage is learn to learn. Learn how to learn. Then you learn to do. Then you learn to be. Then you learn to become. It's these stages of learning as you go through. And as you're going through, you're leaning more and more on learning through experience and finding the right people to talk to about it afterwards. And that's how you grow. Because sooner or later, we all must realize that it doesn't matter what the textbook says. At the end of the day, that's teaching me. You could be saying, "Oh, come on now, Frank, there's some learning there." Yes, there is. But the most important learning is through experience. You've mentioned a couple of times Sports Training Principles, and I'm pretty pleased with that book. It's in its 6th edition. I'm happy with how it's grown. And you'll have seen if you've looked at how it grew. To begin with, I wrote the whole thing on my own. Now I don't do that because other people know more about these bits than I do, and I want them to sort of be the leaders and all of that. But what I did do is do another couple of books that are nothing to do with science at the end of the day. Sports Training Principles. They're about people. They're about what I've learned in my life about people and about winning. The first little book was called Winning, and the second one, which I think actually is the better now, is called Winning Matters. And it's trying to take all that I've learned, not just from my own sport, but from other sports, from athletes as well as coaches, from people in other walks of life, professional people, people who are trauma surgeons under pressure, people who are doctors, supersonic pilots, the military in bits and pieces, because each one of them, just as you said, has got something that they can bring to your model. And sometimes you'll get rid of that bit of your model because this is better, but sometimes it will simply take it to a new level. And that to me that's why I wrote the second 2 books, because there's very little science in it. You'll see that I cross-reference a lot of stuff that I've read and so on. But for the most part, this is what I've learned rather than, and what I would arrogantly suggest other people might like to learn too.
For sure. Frank, you have so much amazing knowledge and wisdom and insight, and I'm so thankful that you shared those extra book resources that you've written as well, because I'm definitely going to be adding them to my own library here very shortly. This has been an awesome podcast.
Chase Rebecca and get your send your home address, and she'll send you a book.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. I love how this has come full circle, and I love all the knowledge and insight and experiences that you've shared about coaching with our listeners. Do you have any closing thoughts or closing remarks that you want people to hear, or do you want to say or mention anything about the EACA and any more about your upcoming events there?
Well, but by all means, go to the websites, the GACA, Global Athletics Coaching Academy website, or the EACA website. In fact, become a member because it's free. The EACA website will give you access to some of the immediately to some of the great presentations we've been fortunate enough to have annually at the International Festival of Athletics Coaching. And belong to that community. And oh, by the way, what we're trying to do is to connect the coaching community in the world. So the Oceania Coaches Association, the Asia Coaches Associations, NACATFCA, the North America, Central America, and Caribbean Coaches Association. And so we're bringing them all together so that once you're a member of one, you've got associate membership of the others. And you can now have a community around the world that you can share your wisdom with, and you can collect the wisdom from them. So, but all of that really comes back to the very beginning. I'm a coach. I'm very grateful that you've recognized me as a coach. I've spent my whole life coaching. And to everybody who's listening in, never lose your coaching passion, because when you're exercising it, you are changing the world.
Frank, that's amazing advice and a great point to end on. Thank you so much for your time and for all the knowledge and wisdom that you've shared with us. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Brawn Body Health and Fitness Podcast. If you like this episode, please make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform and share this episode with a friend who you think would enjoy hearing it. Additionally, if you want to help support this podcast and keep future episodes going, please check out our links below where you can support us directly or through engaging in any of our affiliate marketing links. Last, please make sure you check us out on social media at Brawn Body and leave a 5-star review, especially if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify.